Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. It's the last day of summer, or at least last show of summer for me. We got a little more summer coming on this. I hate winter. I can't stand it. I know I've been in Canada my whole life. I just suffered too much working as a surveyor, freezing way too many times. I can take the heat. So I'm going to mourn the end of summer. I guess on the bright side, we can look forward to our political clowns getting back in session at every level of government, though, so we have a lot more stuff to go on and piss and moan about, which is, what I specialize in. There's never a shortage of material, of course, and there's no shortage of it today. Later on, I'm going to have guest David Clement on. He's been on before. It's been quite a while, though, and he's with the Consumer Choice Center. We're going to talk about that big liberal move where they've now banned nicotine pouches. They're saving the youth of the world from nicotine pouches. Apparently, that was the biggest threat to them. We can get a crack pipe, from a vending machine in Nanaimo, but heaven help us if somebody got a hold of a nicotine pouch. So we'll discuss that. And yes, be sure, guys, for those who are watching live, anyways, use the comment scroll. I appreciate it. I like seeing the comments. Keep them civil. I see what the title of this show today, and I'll get into that in a moment. I knew it was going to work some folks out. And somebody, Cory Starkiller, a commenter, came in an hour ago, actually. I hope he's still here. He says, so the Western Standard openly admits to being controlled opposition. I wonder who's paying for this. No, we aren't controlled opposition. Not everything is a conspiracy. If we were getting big bucks from the WEF, do you think I'd be wearing this cheap sport coat? Come on, guys. I only get my hair cut once every couple of months. Either way, I'll go further as we discuss these things. Good to see you there, Ron, Mr. Stanley, and Paradoxy, some of the regulars in the comments scroll. It can be an interactive show. We can have some fun. So, okay, let's see what this guy's commenting about, why he's worked up. I'm talking about 15-minute cities. Now, bear with me. I know they trigger many people, and I'm talking about defending them in a way. The issue we have isn't 15-minute communities in themselves. It's that we're dealing with urban density-obsessed authoritarian zealots who plan cities. The issue isn't the concept, it's with the motivation of those promoting it and how they want to go about it. The World Economic Forum density zealots, they want to see densely packed urban centers with high-rise buildings and strictly controlled living standards. Their motivations are based on building a rigid socialist society with the movement and actions of people strongly regulated. They claim their motivations are based on environmentalism, of course, and egalitarianism, but that's what the Soviet Union claimed as well. And actually, I did have the pleasure of seeing those giant, ugly row houses in Moscow back in the 80s. Not a pretty thing. Now, the 15-minute city proponents inspired by the WEF, they have no interest in allowing people to exercise their individual choice. That's why they're obsessed with public transit, making individual automobile ownership impractical, if not impossible. They want to squash people into enclaves, and they feel the only way to do it is to regulate movement. This was evident in the UK, where a city tried to force auto owners to stay within certain districts, and they were offering fines if they didn't do so. The WEF vision of the 15-minute cities, it's one of virtual imprisonment. Like most authoritarian states, the elites, of course, would travel and enjoy lavish lifestyles, but the commoners would be left to dull, drudging existences. We're kind of almost there. I mean, look at Canada, where we send our folks overseas to environmental conferences, and they treat themselves on the taxpayers' dime to nice, lavish affairs there at these shindigs. We aren't that far from the two-tiered world the WEF types want us to enjoy. So people don't trust the government to manage their lives, and for very good reasons. I mean, the COVID days aren't that far in the rearview mirror, and we can remember just how eager the political class and their bureaucrats are to control us whenever possible. Unfortunately, this mistrust has led many to instinctively oppose all forms of community planning, even if the planning is good. Now, think of a 15-minute city concept that's not based on authoritarianism, but is instead based on free market capitalism, free movement, and minor zoning controls. Think of a community where stores, schools, medical centers, other services are all mostly within a 15-minute walk, or at least a short drive. Savings could be had as people don't find themselves commuting as far for work or services, and we get a tighter community bonding as people will get to know each other and socialize in the community hubs. Now, what I'm describing isn't nefarious at all if living within these communities is voluntary. In fact, we have thousands of them already. We call them small towns. Dense urban downtown hubs are obsolete. It used to be essential that large businesses had to set up administrative centers nearby each other so meetings could be held, communications and documents could be sent, and so that workers could all commute to one spot in reasonable time. With modern vehicles and communication methods, businesses can and are moving away from urban centers, and they're setting up suburban campuses or heading to smaller cities and towns. With the ability to work from home increasing, many people are choosing. That's the key part here, guys, choice. They're choosing to escape the cities and enjoying smaller town life, or at least moving to the fringes of the cities rather than being stuck in the core. New and growing communities are enjoying an influx of new residents, and they're creating local services to make the areas more appealing. They aren't doing it because city planners are making them doing it. They're doing it because that's what citizens want. The irony of the whole 15-minute city issue is that 15-minute cities will form organically if only the authoritarians would just leave citizens alone. Smaller business hubs will form on the outskirts of cities and residential communities will surround them. The density zealots will decry this trend. Of course, it's urban sprawl. They claim it's environmentally harmful to let people spread out. In reality, smaller suburban communities and small towns, they foster more green space than any densely packed urban downtown, and there tend to be fewer discarded syringes and less scent of piss as well. The world's changing and we need to plan for it. Smaller communities with independent services within them are the future. There's nothing wrong with 15-minute cities. We just need to reimagine what they'll be and how we're going to achieve them. We got to distinguish between good 15-minute cities and bad ones. It's not hard to tell which ones with a simple rule. If the proponent of a 15-minute city says we need more government to get there, they're proposing the wrong kind. So I guess to use a cheesy statement, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. 15-minute cities aren't all that bad. Just let us choose them. All right. Enough about that. Let's get on to our news editor, Dave Naylor, and update on what else is going on out there in the world. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
I knew it.
Knew what?
I knew you were a WF stooge.
Yes, I know. I got a poster of Klaus Schwab in my bedroom.
Yeah. I mean, you live in a place that takes 2 minutes to walk across the entire town.
Yeah.
And you're lecturing us city folk on city life.
I'm saying you should move out to areas like I live in if possible.
All right. Hey, I'm declaring the drought over.
Yeah.
This alleged drought that we've been undergoing. Holy cow, was it raining heavy this morning?
Yeah, the drought's really caused a lot of mushrooms to spring up my lawn this year.
No kidding. No kidding. You know what? I haven't seen much, though, just thinking about it. Dandelions. Is it just me? I haven't seen any dandelions this
Not
year.
in a while. I mean, the early part they came out, but yeah, they kind of
suppose.
disappeared pretty fast. Lots of wasps, though.
Got some news you're not going to believe. So you remember that ISIS terrorist who was granted citizenship in Toronto?
Yeah.
And then they arrested him for trying to do terrorist type things,
Yeah,
killing
he
people.
dissected a guy on video.
Yeah, dissected him. Yeah, chopped him up. The Liberals' public safety minister today testified that's how the system should work.
Oh.
You let the terrorists in, you give them citizenship, you're only tipped off by a foreign government that they're going to blow something up, and that's how the system should work? I mean, come on, man. It's ridiculous. The ridiculousness continues into wacky BC, where Fraser Health they were offering a free crack pipe delivery service. If you order up a crack pipe, another drug paraphernalia, they'll drop it off at your house, no problem. Well, Premier Eby didn't like that and ordered that stopped. Then the story on the crack vending machines in BC hospitals and Nanaimo and a couple of other places where you can just go up to a vending machine, press a button and get a cocaine snorting kid or a crack pipe. Well, Minister Eby, even though it was his government that approved them, Premier Eby, his government approved them, but he's now going to review it after it's been brought to light. Gives your head a shake. Got a call from yourself defending Premier Smith and her decision to move around AHS and maybe get them out of the hospital running business.
Yeah.
And of course, the left has lost their mind, and Naheed Nenshi is openly weeping in the streets. I must say, I'm not sucking up to you, but it's a good call.
Oh, thanks.
It's a good call. Hammer Time at Home Depot, they've become the latest company to come under fire for their woke policies and sponsoring all sorts of sexual minority stuff. So we'll see if they bow to the pressure like Harley Davidson and Jack Daniels and John Deere and Tractor World and all the companies that have wilted under the pressure. And under the category of no blank Sherlock, the Public Health Agency of Canada has admitted their pandemic COVID action plan was a failure.
Holy cow.
Who would have guessed it?
Only a little late out of the gate with that, aren't
A little late out of the gate. But you know what? They're just getting ready for the monkeypox. So hopefully they've now got a better game plan.
Well, there's a new one I just saw today. It's called EEE. I forget what that all stands for. It's mosquito-borne, and an 80-year-old man in eastern states has been diagnosed. The first one with
sloth virus.
Yeah, something like that. And the legacy media has made that a headline because one person out of the few hundred million in North America has come down with something non-fatal. So
as soon as I know where you can get your vaccine for that, I'll let you know.
Okay.
And our readers and viewers.
Well, I'm sure our state learned from COVID though, so they can properly respond.
Absolutely, we won't be able to get on airplanes without it.
Right. All right. Thanks, Dave. I'll let you get back to digging through the rest of those. Again, absurd stories.
So, yeah, sometimes you just shake your head.
The truth really is stranger than
it's,
fiction.
That's why I enjoyed it. So it's so strange.
It is.
And we'll see you on the pipeline tonight.
You bet. All right. So that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. As you see, lots of stories coming out from the good, the bad, and the ridiculous. But we put them all out there. There's a lot of content and good stuff. Guys, this one I'd like to nag you. I have to. This is how we pay the bills. It's $9.99 a month. It's $100 a year. Get past that paywall. Keep us independent. Keep me flogging these 15-minute cities. All that good stuff. Get on there. westernstandard.news/subscription. We don't take government dollars. We won't take it. They're not really that eager to give it to us. But the reason we can do that is because you've been subscribing. So if you have already, thank you very much. And if you haven't, come on, guys, get in there. It's less than a newspaper subscription used to be. So, yeah, I see a lot of the comments are talking about with the monologue, like Mark Bass saying the same thing. I don't have a problem with 15-minute cities as long as I'm not forced to stay within them. That's the thing. You see, they've taken, and that's the typical thing of governments, isn't it? You take a good thing, and you add government and you turn it bad. That's the problem. Meritocrat also saying, yep, you can drive through a 10,000 population small town within 15 minutes. Yeah, and a community of 10,000 would typically have, everything you'd need, a school, grocery store, some sort of medical center, things like that. Like, we can spread out. There is a difference. The loons, the civic planners, the mayors and councils and cities, they want to squash us all in and up, which is horrible. We need them to go out. Little communities, outside. We can communicate. We don't need to be all jammed in like that anymore. But yeah, some of the stuff is just nuts. So speaking of healthcare, then let's get back to that. And that's funny because I want to see more healthcare options growing out there. Premier Smith, things have gone bananas on her own. And she, yes, as Dave said, is weeping the blues. He's the Alberta NDP leader. And what has happened is Premier Smith said at a town hall meeting that we should consider having Covenant Health take over the administration of some hospitals in Alberta to add competition between the administrations, from Alberta Health Services, which is a giant bureaucracy, and maybe with the competition, it would actually, encourage them all to manage things a little better. That's all she said. That's what she said. But, the legacy media and NCHI and the unions and Friends of Medicare, which is just a union group, are furious. Now, listen, a lot of people don't look at the nuts and bolts of healthcare provision because it's boring. Most of what they're worried about is, hey, I'm dying waiting to see a specialist, literally, or I'm dying while waiting in an emergency room, literally. We got people in hallways on gurneys, literally. The word literally gets abused a heck of a lot, but in this case, it's properly applied. And when you look to BC, it's run by the NDP, the socialists. Guess what? They got the same problem because Canada's system is broken. We need to change some things. It's a monopoly. And you see, when there's a monopoly, the consumer always loses, always. It doesn't matter if the consumer or if the monopoly is a government one or if it's a private business one. You're hooped either way. You need competition. You need more than one option. Well, we have a health provision monopoly and an administration monopoly. So AHS, you hear the term quite often. That's Alberta Health Services. That is the giant bureaucracy that manages Alberta's healthcare system. It has over 100,000 employees under its umbrella, and 90% of them are unionized. They don't want to see anything change. They have nobody to compete with, and what they do, and the unions do, and the rest, is lobby against any change. Now, in Alberta, we have some stuff going on. We have nurses who've been playing the part-time shift shuffling game. They stay on as part-timers. They still get big, giant pensions and benefits, by the way, because people say, the AHS won't give them jobs as full-timers because they wouldn't get benefits. That's not true. They get benefits even as part-timers. And then they shuffle around and play the overtime game. And what we have is hundreds of nurses in Alberta who make over $100,000 a year. There was a nurse in Alberta a couple of years ago made over $500,000 playing this game. How do they get away with this? Well, because you have a union-dominated administration all under one umbrella that has a monopoly that doesn't have the motivation to take on that battle, to change those things. So how can you change that? Break the monopoly. And Smith talked about having Covenant Health break it. And in fact, Covenant Health already manages a number of hospitals. In fact, some big ones in Edmonton, big ones in smaller towns. But they are Catholic-based. I propose that Smith goes even further. It's not enough to just switch some management to Covenant Health. Let's get some private companies bidding on the management of these hospitals. Let's give them incentives saying, if you can, and again, you build it into it. There's got to be good patient outcomes and, of course, better efficiency in doing it. and we can all win. All right, I see my guest in the lobby, though, so I'm going to bring him in, and we'll talk a little more. I want to get on a little more about healthcare after that, but first we should talk to Mr. Clement from the Consumer Choice Center. So thanks for joining me today, David.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've had you on. I've overdue. I'm sorry for the lapse.
No worries at all.
So, you know, what I've got you on, and I appreciate you, you've been speaking on this issue a bit. I've read past columns. When we talk about, I guess, harm mitigation when it comes to tobacco use, I mean, smoking is bad for you. We got that. Everybody kind of agrees with that. But now the war seems to have turned against alternative nicotine delivery systems, and the government is cracking down on nicotine pouches. Can you kind of expand on what's happening here?
Yeah, so essentially what's happened is the federal health minister was upset that Health Canada had approved nicotine pouches to be used as a smoking cessation tool, basically a way to get people off of cigarettes, just like Nicorette, right? We've seen those products advertised for decades, it seems. And so he was particularly concerned that nicotine pouches would end up in the hands of kids and all sorts of, somewhat valid concerns. But the issue here is that rather than simply age gate all nicotine products, which he certainly could have done, he's removed them from corner stores and he's banned 2 of the 3 available flavors that exist. And that's a huge disservice to anybody who's trying to quit, because if we know, I'm sure you do, and I certainly do, people who've tried for years or even longer to quit, it's really important that when they go to buy cigarettes, they're prompted with the less risky alternative. It's why it's great that we sell vape products at corner stores, so that when someone goes in, maybe they'll consider buying something that isn't going to cause cancer. That would be great for public health. It's a win all around. It's something that should be celebrated. But for some reason, the health minister has had his sights set on nicotine pouches, despite the fact that Health Canada has deemed them equal to Nicorette.
So some of the concern, I guess it's a bit of a valid one. We don't want to create new addicts. We don't want kids to come in, or anybody, even adults for that matter. If you never take a nicotine, don't start, whether it's a pouch or whatever you do. But is there any evidence that anybody really started an addiction through these pouches? I mean, most, I would think, just kind of usually you begin with cigarettes.
Well, it's weird because in the government's announcement about this, they didn't cite any Canadian data. They just cited some anecdotes from the United States, which is an entirely different market because all of these things have been on the market for a lot longer. But ironically, what they missed in their figures about youth access is that if you wanted to use the United States, youth smoking is at an all-time low. And that's a great thing. And it really, for me, just missed the whole point, because we don't want minors to access alcohol. And that's why we have an age restriction on it. That would be the easy way to ensure that kids don't have access to nicotine pouches, would just be, okay, we're going to make it equal to the age of smoking. And that's it. And leave it with these retailers to sort out the rest. Because think about the cognitive dissonance here, where the government trusts convenience stores to sell cigarettes, which cause cancer, but not sell them to minors, but doesn't trust convenience stores to sell, a product that doesn't cause cancer to minors. And to me, that the limited or hypocritical application of harm reduction here from the federal government is just mind-boggling.
Well, that's it. When we're talking about harm reduction, of course, we hear a lot more about it when it comes to opioid addiction, areas of consumption and so on, where they insist then, and okay, perhaps it's a valid case, if we're going to get addicts to utilize harm reduction products, whether it's free syringes or even pipes now that are being given out in vending machines, under the rationale that we need to make it easy for them to grab these things. We need it to be visible and available. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when it comes to smoking, we want to make the cessation products as invisible and unavailable as humanly possible. It's a complete double standard.
Well, it's a complete double standard, and it completely undermines the rest of their arguments on harm reduction. And what's even more irritating is that, like, if we look at safe supply, right? We're talking hydromorphone, which is equivalent to heroin.
Yes.
You have a government that's distributing hydromorphone, which may or may not be a good policy. There's a huge debate about that. But it's so confusing to me to have a government go that route on harm reduction for opioids and then go the prohibitionist mentality on tools that we know help smokers quit and are so exponentially less risky. And when I say that, it's just to put it into perspective for anybody who's watching. If smoking is a risk level of 99, vaping is about a 5, Nicorette and nicotine pouches are a 1. So we're talking about as low risk as you can get while still consuming nicotine. And so, yeah, the cognitive dissonance here from the health minister is baffling. It just feels weirdly vindictive on his part, where he just has a grudge, and so he's now, through the budget, has these new powers to do what he calls precision regulating, and they can go after any product or any medical device or any drug that Health Canada has approved and basically veto that. And the precedent there, we're talking about nicotine pouches today, but the precedent for a politically motivated health minister to just willy-nilly ban something because he says so is a pretty dangerous precedent.
There's a lot of authority packed into his chair. And I mean, part of it is when he's a bit of an activist in himself. I mean, he isn't a medical professional, though he did work as communications person for the Heart and Lung Association, I think, or something like that, Heart and Stroke Foundation. Yeah. But I mean, I find with activists, especially if they've gotten their way, I mean, it's kind of a broader discussion, but, cigarette smoking, I mean, it's down to a minuscule amount of what it used to be. Smokers have been chased out of every public spot. They kind of have to hide in the alley and I was going to say in doorways, but they're not allowed near doorways to smoke. But the anti-smoking lobby has almost succeeded. They've really knocked it down. And now it's like they have to set their sights somewhere new. They've got to find a new target. Like in Calgary, they were working on banning vaping from city parks. There was no indication whatsoever that people were being harmed by people vaping in city parks or that it was, some sort of problematic thing, but they just seem to have a chip on their shoulder for any kind of product, and they're going to come after them.
It's the fun police. It's the fun police. That's all it is. It's nanny-statism and mission creep. And I mean, it's just really uncomfortable behavior. It's fine for the anti-organizations to have their stance. If they want to convince the public to essentially be teetotalers or temperate or avoid all of these substances, that's their prerogative. And I wish them the best of luck in doing so. But when it crafts policies, that's when I get really uncomfortable, because you get these ridiculous things like allowing Nicorette to be flavored fresh fruit or berry, but not allowing nicotine pouches to have those flavors, allowing Nicorette to be sold anywhere, not allowing nicotine pouches to be sold anywhere except for pharmacies. And so it's you see this kind of activist policy push, and it's that mission creep where, I mean, ironically, Canada wants to get to a place where we're deemed smoke-free, which is less than 5%. There's really only one OECD country who's gotten to that mark, and it's Sweden. And what does Sweden have to do with all of this? Well, where do nicotine pouches come from? They come from Sweden. They're widely available in Sweden. Hardly anybody smokes. Yes, some people use nicotine pouches, former smokers, etc. But they got to smoke-free by actually having a somewhat principled approach to harm reduction. And so if they wanted to achieve their grand goal of in quotes, smoke-free Canada, the best way to do that is to offer as many less harmful alternatives as possible to people, to get them away from smoking, not to make it harder to quit, right? The point is to try and make it easier for people to quit smoking, not to make it harder. And these pouches bans and flavor bans and all of the policies that they've done in regards to vaping just make it harder for smokers to quit. And nobody wins. Nobody wins in that scenario.
Yeah, I see Mark Bass. I'm just responding to one of the commenters wondering about flavored patches and wondering if it sticks to your tongue. No, it's pouches we're speaking of, not patches. So that it'll go under your lip, kind of like chewing tobacco, but it's not tobacco based. It's a nicotine delivery system. I'll offer a bit of an anecdote. Like I was a heavy smoker. I was in the oil field for 20 years. We would just chain smoke when I'd stand at my survey transit and so on. When I quit, oh boy, it was a hard time for everybody who had to live around me at the time too. I used patches to help wean me off it. And they helped. They helped me a lot. And to be honest, if I was 3 weeks into my quitting and for some reason I couldn't get a hold of patches, you know what I would have done? I would have bought cigarettes.
Yeah. And we launched a campaign on this, and we have, I think 1,400 people who are in their quitting journey or who have quit smoking, who have all said, like, don't ban the flavors, don't restrict these because they're helping me get away from smoking. One of the guys who gave us a testimonial went from 16 cigarettes a day, which is pretty heavy, to 1 or 2 now in the matter of months. That is great, and that should be encouraged, not discouraged. And for some reason, our health minister doesn't really seem to be focused on health when we're talking about nicotine pouches.
No, and it's just counterintuitive. I mean, we aren't seeing the secondary grief that's happening. Again, if we talk about harm mitigation, when you mentioned hydromorphone, which is a very dangerous, very strong drug in itself. I mean, they feel that it's less dangerous than the street fentanyl or other drugs somebody's getting. Fine. But the problem that's been happening is that, of course, people will be getting their hydromorphone, they're trading it to their dealer for fentanyl, and then the dealer is selling the secondary hydromorphone. They call it diversion, and it's actually creating new addicts. But there's been no secret secondary market of nicotine pouches, to my knowledge. You know, I haven't seen a guy in a trench coat in a street corner offering any nicotine pouches or patches, for that matter.
Well, they're in 2018, Health Canada issued a recall notice on products that a brand called White Fox, which are not regulated by Health Canada. The illegal pouches, which are legal in other jurisdictions, they just end up in Canada to be sold. That industry is going to boom now because the legal nicotine pouches are going to only be one flavor and are going to be exponentially harder to get. And so I think that problem will get worse. It's not a question of what you'll have is you'll either have people who use nicotine pouches go back to smoking, and that is not great. Nobody wants that. Or you're going to have a scenario where they're going to find out ways to either order it through the gray market online, which exists, it's very prominent, or find stores that sell them, which exist. Anyone who uses them probably knows where to get them. And so you're going to have the unregulated products boom. Which from a government perspective is completely defeats the purpose. The products that Health Canada approves are obviously the better ones for consumers to consume. And yet we've just created a situation where the alternatives for these folks is going to be either going back to smoking or finding gray market / black market alternatives, none of which is a good scenario from the perspective of public health or the health ministry.
Yeah, and flavoring these wasn't trying to draw in kids or new addicts. I mean, some sort of flavored pouch to go under your lip. If a kid wants something sweet, they can buy candy, they can buy all sorts of things. Why would they reach for that? But I mean, if I'm trying to quit, I don't want to stick something under my lip all the time that tastes like a cigarette butt. The point is to make it desirable for me to prefer it over cigarettes.
And that's the point, is the flavors are enjoyable for people trying to quit because they don't remind them of smoking. And that's the best part for people who are trying to quit, is they can get something that's mint or berry or fruit flavored that doesn't taste like cigarettes at all. They still get to consume nicotine and try to wean off possibly nicotine altogether that way. But it's all under the guise of protecting children, and the easy answer would have been just age gating all nicotine products so that minors can't access them. But for some reason, the health minister didn't want to do that. He wanted to target just nicotine pouches. Again, I think just because he has a grudge because of who made them, and that is it. And the power that he now has, which a future health minister will have. I always say to everyone, every power you give the government, if you are a liberal, imagine Pierre Poilievre's health minister with that with that power. If you're a conservative, imagine Jagmeet Singh's health minister with that power. If that makes you uncomfortable, it's probably a bad law or a bad a bad policy tool for the health minister to have.
Absolutely. I mean, they have enough authority as it stands. It's just yet another overreach on the government. There's so many of them, but I guess we can discuss it. It's going to be hard to reverse anything until a government changes, if they change anything once they get in. That's the thing too. They don't tend to turn things back. Well, thanks for coming to explain, what's going on and some of the aspects of this. Before I let you go, where can people find your work and what you've been up to? Because I know you cover a lot of great stuff with trade and consumer issues. consumerchoicecenter.org and leavepouchesalone.ca. Those are our main website and our campaign website where we're talking about this and why and how it works. Great. Well, thanks for coming on, David, and lending some common sense to yet another bizarre federal government policy. Hopefully we can hammer some sense into them so we can get on to more important issues down the road.
Of course. Thank you, Cory. Appreciate it.
Thanks. That was David Clement, as I said, from the Consumer Choice Center. And yes, he covers a lot of things as well as that subject in itself. It's just counterintuitive. And again, you see, when we get interests getting into healthcare that have nothing to do with the outcomes in health, that's when we get a problem. And the activist background of our federal health minister seems to be more of what's motivating his moves rather than trying to make things safer or better for people. So I'm kind of segueing that into what I was talking about a bit before, which is the Alberta issue with Premier Smith trying to break up Alberta Health Services, that giant bloated bureaucracy. And kind of as I was getting to before, 100,000 employees under that bureaucracy, 90% of them are unionized. Look, that bureaucracy does not have patient interest in mind. And I'm not saying that they're evil people who want patients to be harmed. No, that's not the case. But the thing is, their priorities start becoming themselves. It becomes how to keep the unions happy, how to get more compensation, how to reduce your workload, and the patient outcomes become secondary. And it shouldn't be controversial. It shouldn't to consider having different management of hospitals. I'm talking baby steps to getting into reforming our healthcare system. We need a heck of a lot more. I tell you what, I think investors should be able to go down the street and build a private hospital right in the middle of a residential area if they can get the zoning permits for it and go to town charging whatever they want for services. But I'm a libertarian, and that's the way I think. I know a lot of other Canadians wouldn't accept that, but let's talk baby steps. Let's talk about the current hospitals. Why can't we have private professionals administer them under regulation? And, try to bring these hospitals up to the best standard they can. Like I said, make some of the compensation based on patient outcome and, getting those outcomes in a reasonable cost, because we're spending more on healthcare every year. You listen to the NDP squawk, and they squawk, and then she squawks. And, oh boy, we're underfunding it. No, we aren't. There is no province in Canada who has cut health spending. None. Political suicide. No government will do it. They've never done it. They're spending more and more and more and more. And guess what? The outcomes are getting worse. In just about anything else in the world, you would say, maybe we're going to try something different, but not here. Because again, you get those bureaucracies like AHS, the only acceptable thing they support, and the Friends of Medicare, again, I despise that. No, they're Friends of Unions, guys. It's a union group. Cut through the BS with these guys. All they will accept is pouring more money into it. You don't fix it that way. You just add to the bloat. So Smith has actually had a bit of the courage to start at least with baby steps. Something else, as Dave mentioned, I wrote a column on this, and it went on to the Western Standard today. And I like innovation. Let's find other ways to fix stuff up. And something that's happened is supposed to open next year. The Enoch Reserve up by Edmonton has an orthopedic surgical center they've been building now for a year and a half. And you know what? A lot of people haven't heard of it. You want to know why? Because the only thing that terrifies the left more than changing healthcare is conflict with First Nations. They're chicken poop when it comes to them. So, I mean, they're not going to go up to the Enoch Reserve and tell the chief and the people, you aren't allowed to do that. You aren't allowed to build this facility that's going to employ people on your reserve and bring funds into your reserve. There's not a chance. They're way too cowardly to do that. So what have they done? They've sat silently. If that surgery clinic was being built, this is a big one, we're talking 3,000 procedures a year. If that was being built anywhere else, Then she would be standing outside, beating a drum and screaming and howling about it's the selling of healthcare in the works. But guess what? He's dead silent. And it's pretty rare when Ninchi's silent on anything, I tell you. Let's build more of them. Let's see it. Most of our major centers have a reserve nearby. Calgary has the Sutina reserve nearby. They've been doing fantastic. They got a Costco with cheap gas because they get exempted from the fuel taxes federally. They got car dealerships going in, dollar stores, you name it. And it's great for the reserve. It's great for consumers. You know what? I want to see them build more. Let's build hospitals on reserves. Private ones for profit. Yes, the P word. And guess what? Maybe we'll get some people treated. Because let's quit BS, and people are literally dying waiting for care. Dying. That's been reported. Thousands are dying in Canada every year because we can't get them in fast enough. Yet still, stubbornly, some people are saying the system works. We just need to give it more money. No, we don't. So if we could find cracks and ways to whittle and show that there's better ways to do it, whether it's changing the management of some hospitals or even building new facilities on reserves, let's do it. Ralph Klein, one of the regrets he said in the end, he always said he backed off when it came to that third way health idea. He was looking to reform healthcare, and that's one of the areas he actually backed off, and he said he regretted doing it. Smith has mentioned that before. I hope she remembers that. I hope she maintains the courage to take on those healthcare zealots, those Puritans, those nutcases, and we can actually see some reforms and see some benefits, and maybe people will be finally inspired to change Canada's system. Because guess what, guys? Our system sucks. And I don't care about the American system, by the way, before you bring it up. Their system sucks too. There's dozens of systems around the world better than ours, and it's about time we utilize them. All right, I've been going on long enough. Let's go on about something else and turn to, we got our business and energy specialist here, Sean Polzer, in the room. How's it going, Sean?
Really well, Cory. How are you?
I'm all right.
I can tell.
Yeah, the veins pulsing in my head. I got lots to spew out. That is what makes me happy.
Lots of energy.
Makes Jane happy at home, too, because good, the nutcase is getting it out of his system, tired. So he'll shut up when he gets here, or at least a little bit.
So we got some breaking news, Cory.
Okay.
So in the past few weeks, we've had this warrior of anti-woke in Tennessee, Robbie Starbuck, and he's been going up against the corporate titans, and they've been crumbling at his feet, just the mere mention. So just less than 10 minutes ago, the latest, I don't know if you want to call it a victim. Do you want to take a guess?
Well, go for it. I think I might have heard, so I don't want to pop that balloon. I was in the news.
Ford.
Oh, no, I'm wrong then. Okay, good.
Ford Motor Company, they're going to drop their human rights counts. That's the LGBTQ index. They're going to, these 500 best places to work. Apparently, these companies, they just pay to get on those lists. So they're going to stop doing that. Everything in the company is going to be merit. Employee resource groups are going to be open to all employees regardless. And these are changes that are going to take place in all its operations all around the world.
Well, good. I mean, that trend, as you mentioned, in Starbucks, I mean, yeah, when you hear somebody raging against the corporations, people think, oh, is this some leftist? Is this some, person who's going to... No, he's coming from just pressuring these guys and exposing the ridiculous DEI trash that they've been consuming rather than actually doing the business they're supposed to be in.
Absolutely. And you know what? We've actually been in contact. He was supposed to be here on the show like today. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, his wife is having a baby, and it's supposed to be a complicated pregnancy. So we're rescheduled for September 11th. But we are going to get live video feed with the man himself and get him to provide his insights and maybe some things that we could do here in Canada. I'm sure we have a long list of corporations.
Absolutely. I'm sure the shareholders will be happy for it. I mean, that's the bottom line. They're in business to make money. Well, and not to worry about pandering to every little left-wing cause and whatnot out there.
Well, and this is what's happening is these companies are doing it proactively because they're getting a bounce. You know what I mean? Like their shares have been going down because of all this stuff. And then when they come out and they proactively do this, like Jack Daniels, John Deere, Harley Davidson, then they get kind of a residual out of it. It's almost like a positive news story for them and their shareholders.
Oh, good. It's good to see some positive stories for a change.
Yeah, exactly.
Right on. Well, looking forward to that.
And in Alberta here, so German petrochemical giant Lind, they're one of the biggest petrochemical companies in the world. They're going to be building a $2 billion hydrogen plant. I don't know if you recall this Dow cracker. It's going to be the first net zero cracker in the world. They announced it back in November, $6.5 billion. Mm-hmm. So this is an adjunct onto that $2 billion to kind of feed that facility. And it's hydrogen, and it's kind of a validation of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's hydrogen strategy, and it seems to be bearing fruit.
So along with that, are there subsidies going into this, or is this just being drawn in for a good investment climate?
It's not so much direct subsidies, so it's not like these EV plants down east, but they are getting some investment tax credits. So if you remember back in the old oil sands day, Ralph had the, as long as you kept on building things, then you could defer.
Yeah, and they had the BRIC program and a few other
things
things
stuff like that. So it's kind of similar to that. There's a petrochemical royalty program. There's some direct investment credits from the federal government, and then the Alberta government tops them up with.
Okay, I just like to check, because I mean, I don't want to be two-faced when I rip into 50 billion going into a battery plant.
Right.
If we were tossing 10 billion into this, I'd say maybe it's not a good deal.
We're not going into the business of producing hydrogen.
Cool.
We're not going into the business of being a business.
The government's not going into it. Yes,
exactly.
Right,
or the taxpayers shouldering that risk.
That's the important.
So yes, that is the important part. And going back to your little take there on EVs, Trudeau finally put 100% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs. So, and there's some dispute out there on whether or not it's actually a good thing, because, well, on his part, whether it's a coherent policy. Because if your goal is to reduce emissions and you want people to do the uptake on these so-called clean cars, then why wouldn't you want them buying $20,000 China? Does it really matter where they come from?
Well, that's it. And I've looked at that and I kind of laughed, because I mean, one of the biggest things that people mention on why they aren't going into EVs, they're expensive. They cost more than a conventional vehicle. If you put this tariff on the Chinese ones, it's going to raise the cost of EVs here. There's no getting around it. So what's your goal? Keeping out foreign source cheaper vehicles or greening the world?
Well, no, what he's trying to do is protect all these $50 billion of subsidies that they've already tossed at all these things that they're losing money at, right?
Yeah.
So the goal isn't really to reduce the emissions. The goal is to protect, his little pet project there that he's already sunk like tens of billions. Like the indirect costs on this thing are probably closer to 100 billion of taxpayers' money.
Well, it'll be interesting to watch where this goes. We're going to pay for it one way or another. That's
one way or another, yeah.
All right. Anything else breaking out there while I got you?
Well, we got Gondak in Norway.
Oh yes, she's going to help us all detransition or some bloody thing.
Right, on the day that the Norwegian state oil company announces like $6.5 billion a year into its oil fields.
Yeah, they're expanding in the North Sea, but and
the president says, like, do you think that the oil age is over here? Forget it. Yeah. Nobody's going to stop us. The environmentalists, nobody. And to put it in perspective, $6.5 billion is probably a decent-sized thermal oil sands plant in Alberta every year for the next 10 years.
Oh, Gondek, well, she's just trying to figure her exit strategy. I think Calgarians have had enough.
No, I think we've figured out the exit strategy.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. I'll let you get back to digging into those energy stories and hypocrisy.
I got to write up for it. Robbie and Ford.
All righty. And look forward to that Robbie Starbuck thing.
Excellent.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. That is Sean Polser in energy. So yeah, lots of stuff going on. We're going to talk business. I'm going to talk a little more into health. And I see Wild Rose popped in, and you always do when we talk health. The American system sucks worse than ours. No, it doesn't, actually. People don't die waiting for it. But you know what? I don't care. It's intellectually lazy. And I expect better of you, Wild Rose. It's lazy to pretend there's only two systems. There's hundreds of systems. There's dozens of systems that are better than ours. Quit this stupid discussion, and it is stupid to shut down discussions of changing our care for fear of being the Americans. It's stupid. European and Asian systems are blowing us out of the water. And yes, they allow profit, but it's regulated. Think of French hospitals, for example. The way that sets up, you can set up a private hospital in France. You can build it. You can get investors, and you can do procedures and charge people for them. But a part of the procedures have to be in the public system. You see, there's still universal coverage. Nobody dies waiting for care. But yes, some people pay to get in faster. Guess what? You all get through faster. You all get better doctors. You all get better treatment. Suck up the envy. Because I notice you pointed out the other thing, but the rich people will just pay to jump the line. Guess what? They already do. They fly to Vietnam. They drive to the United States. It happens, and they get treated by Canadian trained people sometimes. So let's look at the best systems. Which systems are working best? And there's lots of them. And let's emulate them. Let's look at them. But if you immediately dismiss any sort of change because profits are bad, then you're being dumb. You're dismissing solutions. And when you do that, we all suffer. Canada has that system. Guess which other countries share Canada's system? North Korea and Cuba. That's it. That's it. There's nowhere else in the world where it's actually illegal to give somebody healthcare for a price. It's ridiculous. Is it my body or not? Is it my wallet or not? Why should I not have the right to spend my money to get something done? Guess what? I do have the right. I just have to leave the country to do it. And it's not just rich people, it's desperate people. I mean, I'm not rich. But if I was told by a doctor, yeah, you're going to need this heart procedure in the next 4 months or you're going to die, we'll schedule you in for 7 months from now. And that's really kind of what's happening right now in Canada. Well, what am I going to do? Sit here and say, oh, well, it's a bummer. I'm not allowed to buy it. I'll just die. No, I will remortgage my house. I will borrow from friends and family. I'll do everything I can, and I will cross the border and get it done anyways. So why don't we accept this reality and get the better care here? Let's quit closing our minds and snapping them shut every time when somebody talks about changing our system. Our system stinks. It stinks. Look online, search it yourself. There's all sorts of ratings in different countries and healthcare systems. And Canada's is way, way far from the top, guys, way from the top. And I don't care about the American system. I couldn't care less. As others mentioned on here, I saw the Swiss. We talk about Swedes. Let's talk about Taiwan. Let's talk about Singapore. They're all outperforming us, guys. And they all have universal care. That's the aspect everybody's talking about. Universal, that's the important part. You never get turned away for lack of money. We can have that. But we got to quit this idiocy of illegalizing private provision. It's dumb. And it's costing us. And it's time to get better. All right, that's enough out of me for today. I appreciate you tuning in. I do appreciate you, Wild Rose. You're great. We always differ on that healthcare one. So be sure to tune in again. Next week, we will cover all this all over again. Check into the pipeline, check into Hannaford. We're building up our productions. Lots of stuff going on out there. Sean's going to be talking to Starbucks. It's all there, guys. So subscribe to these channels, share these channels, and be sure to come in next week. We'll do this all again with a whole new set of issues. Thanks. If the name Ted Byfield brings back fond memories, well, we got a party coming up for you guys. On September 25th, Toasting Ted is what it's called. It's going to honor a great conservative who published Alberta Report news magazine. It's going to be bagpipes, singing, live auction stakes, speeches by Premier Smith, Preston Manning, Stephen Harper, quite a lineup. The Western Standard is the final incarnation or the latest incarnation of Alberta Report that Ted Byfield founded. And I mean, he was a great Albertan. He really made his mark on this province. And this evening of celebration for him is really going to be outstanding. You get there, toastingted.ca. That's the website. You can get your tickets. This one's going to sell out. I mean, again, if you want to see Smith, Manning, Harper, all in one spot, one night, be sure to get there.